From the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network studios in Des Moines, this is Iowa Ag Matters. I'm Riley Smith. In today's show, Mark continues the conversation on herd health strategies with the National Pork Board. I visit with National Pork Producers Council President-elect Pat Hord, and Dustin talks with the USDA about the preservation of George Washington's prized cherries. Now let's welcome in our hosts, Mark Magnuson and Dustin Huffman.
Well, Dustin, as we look at the ag marketplace and what we saw here this morning, it's a little bit interesting. We've seen soybeans with some gains here, some decent gains to begin the day. And as you think about things, it's kind of counterintuitive to what's happening around the world because, as we know right now, with the peace process hopefully still rolling along in the Middle East and the United States and Iran, hopefully going to come to that final agreement on that peace deal as the week moves on. The oil price has gone down. And so you might think that that would put some pressure then on the soybean complex because of the lack of demand for soybean oil in relation to soy oil or in relation to the crude oil. But at the same time, we've seen those prices go up this morning. But there are some rumors swirling about China coming in and potentially buying some new crop soybeans or getting ready to. There's some rumors in the industry right now. So that's going to be something I want to talk with Joe Camp of Comstock here about this morning and see if maybe that's part of what's powering the soybeans here today.
And that probably is. I mean, the market is so anxious to hear anything on the front of China actually making some of those purchases on what basically came to a handshake agreement that between Presidents Trump and Xi well over a month ago already. And we still have not seen them make good on any of those. And as we've talked before, though, it's really hard to enforce something that really isn't written down or signed. And so it's kind of good faith all the way around. And quite frankly, I'm taking this with a grain of salt because of the fact that I want to see it. I hope we can see it to give the market some strength, but I'm not going to be surprised if this turns out to be, nothing at the moment because China doesn't have to do anything. Of course, though, if we can get some of those peace deals done in the Middle East between us and Iran, China has been pushing for that because the Strait of Hormuz blockage has been affecting them and the oil they get from Iran. So, there may be a little bit of back and forth quid pro quo, or at least nothing else. Hey, if we can get this done, then we'll make good on some of these commitments, kind of thing, or at least some discussion on that. Or hey, maybe they're just saying maybe not with quid pro quo, but saying okay, if they're making movements on peace, now let's go ahead and show them that we're gonna make good on our good faith. It's a good way of looking at it, but we'll have to see how it actually plays out.
And that makes a lot of sense, based on your point you were talking about yesterday in terms of the Strait of Hormuz and how important that is for shipping around the world. Because you might look at it on the surface, if you were just dropped in day number one on Earth and you didn't know about the inner workings of what happens all over the planet, you might say, hey, why are the United States and China, for example, so invested in an area in the Middle East like the Strait of Hormuz? Well, that just shows how globalized the economy has become, that countries across the world can have so much interest in a specific area because of all of those products and all of the business that's going on around the world. And certainly the Strait of Hormuz plays a big part in that.
Well, we are going to have to keep an eye on how these things progress. And of course, we're going to start things off today. As you mentioned, we're going to be talking with Joe Camp of Comstock Investments, talking about how he is seeing some of these perceived purchases, or, how the progression is going. Right now, he's talking with Mark Magnuson.
Joined today by Joe Camp of Comstock for the opening market discussion. Joe, what's happening with the trade in the grains?
Another example, like the way we started off the week Sunday night, where you can't trust the overnight trade, which was in both cases Sunday and now into last night, lower grain futures, but a quick turnaround then. It took some time, but ultimately we did settle mostly higher on Monday. That was a rejection then of new lows and also a test of support. So far successful for the bulls at these key price levels for nearby corn futures at $4, for July soybeans at $11 even. And then again, backing off overnight only to charge higher after the 8:30 restart. We have some rumors swirling about China, and that would be then the reason why soybeans have the leadership. We've got gains 15, 16 cents to start out. This expectation that maybe China is ready to start buying new crop soybeans to fulfill those previous purchase commitments. to clear the way and maybe to respond as well to this latest price drop. We're talking about this last month, soybean futures being down over $1, so you can get more competitive with that kind of price swing, and ultimately these expectations of China potentially being back, helping for a firmer going early on.
Joe, are there any other news stories on the grain side that you're watching this week as far as things we need to be focused on?
Certainly, you take a look at the influence of war, because that's the focus of how we started out so many weeks now since the outbreak of the war with Iran late in February. You had the case this week as well, where it was crude oil at first depressing the broader commodity space. But then there was a sort of decoupling that allowed the grain futures to go higher, and the same with this morning, where you have the higher grain futures despite crude oil being lower yet again, this time back below $80 a barrel for the first time in a couple of months now. You have that as an ongoing influence that can still pop up, certainly, even with a ceasefire extended. It's well extended and then eligible for being broken up, unfortunately. So we look at that as the next possibility for a headline risk. And that fits, too, with adding to China as being one of these three major things that we're keying in on for the direction of grain futures. That's, like we talked about, China and when and if they're going to return for U.S. crop exports. The next one being the war with Iran, and those two have been related in ways, China and Iran, and what happens with the broader energy complex and the ongoing headline risks, like I talk about, related to war. And then the third thing being weather. And that's, of course, what we'll continue to monitor so closely. Favorable conditions up to this point, again, expressed by the crop progress numbers, improved crop condition scores for corn and soybeans Monday evening, but something that, of course, can flip on a dime weather-wise. It's a long season to go and still possibilities for a more bullish weather market later.
ACM and CMA award winner, Hardy.
That's my favorite country song.
Live in concert.
I woke up on the wrong side of the truck bed this morning.
August 13th, 8 p.m., Iowa State Fair Grandstand.
You got it good, old boy.
With special guest McCoy Moore. Hardy Live. Reserve tickets on sale now through iowastatefair.org. Hardy 2026.
Story of George Washington and the cherry tree is one of the best-known legends in American history. While historians have long debunked that tale, a recent discovery at Mount Vernon revealed a very real connection between America's first president and the fruit he cultivated on his Virginia estate. During restoration work at Mount Vernon, archaeologists uncovered bottles of preserved cherries hidden beneath the mansion. Through historical records and correspondence, researchers linked the discovery to instructions Martha Washington had given household staff while the Washingtons were living in New York during George Washington's presidency. The cherries have been preserved for future use, likely in holiday pies, before somehow being misplaced and forgotten for almost 250 years. The discovery has opened a remarkable window into both colonial life and early American agriculture. Ben Gutierrez is the USDA's tart cherry curator at the Plant Genetic Resources Unit in Geneva, New York. He says fruit production was an important part of colonial life, and orchards often signaled that a family intended to establish permanent roots on the land.
Fruit was a major part of colonial culture, and really a signal of land ownership was to plant an orchard. You planted trees as a sign that you were here to stay, you were going to establish a homestead. And so really the very different economies and how we kind of view things today.
Fruit orchards were a common part of colonial life, but George Washington took agriculture far beyond simply growing food. Throughout his life, he constantly experimented with new practices and new crops at Mount Vernon long before he became president. Washington was known for testing his ideas and searching for ways to improve the productivity of his land.
He was an avid agricultural experimenter, so he did a lot for figuring out drainage and rotation for his home at Mount Vernon. He also planted a lot of cherries, and he wrote about these cherries are new to the areas. American horticulture is kind of in its infant stage, and so figuring out what works, what cultivates, what can we bring right out of Europe and work with there. So experimenting with tart cherries, sweet cherries, kind of just exploring what the possibilities are.
The discovery itself was equally remarkable. The cherries have been preserved using cork stoppers and a tar-based seal that protected them for centuries. Researchers worked with both historical records and modern science to determine exactly what had been found. Through genetic testing of the preserved pits, scientists were able to identify the fruit.
We do know it was a tart cherry. So some of the pit kind of indicate that it's this species. We got down into the genetic information that we could retrieve, and it does match better to the tart cherry signature.
The findings went beyond simply identifying the cherries. Some of the preserved pits were successfully germinated, creating descendants of the very same cherries once grown at Mount Vernon. Those trees are expected to become part of the estate's orchard, restoring a direct connection to Washington's agricultural experiments. The discovery also highlights a fruit that remains important in specialty crop production today.
The tart cherry cultivation isn't that broad in the United States currently. It's more of a processing or a juicing cherry. Grandma's pies, right, are full of tart cherries. But if you look at tart cherry consumption, Europe versus the United States today, tart cherries are much more broadly consumed internationally. So maybe this is a chance for we can expand our markets and explore how to bring in new crops and new flavors into American horticulture.
The story also offers a reminder that Washington was not working in isolation. Early American leaders regularly shared ideas, seeds, plants, and growing practices as they worked to determine what crops and varieties would succeed in the young nation.
Thomas Jefferson was just a little bit south of Washington. George Mason, all these founding fathers were sharing fruit and sharing what their successes were in agriculture. And so we actually know of some of the records from George Washington says he got his cherries from George Mason. Kind of this partnership, this enthusiasm for trading, things that were working, kind of this willingness to collaborate among early Americans. So such a beautiful time period and kind of how we're starting to piece together our early American horticultural practices.
Today, the rediscovered cherries serve as more than just a fascinating historical artifact. They provide a direct link to the ag innovation that helped shape America during its earliest years. More than 2 centuries after Martha Washington directed they be preserved, those cherries are once again contributing to the story of American agriculture. For Iowa Ag Matters, I'm Dustin Huffman.
Your local radio station brings you the local news you depend on. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network complements that with ag news, weather, and market updates tailored for Iowa's farmers. Together, we deliver the best of both worlds, local connection and industry expertise. It's all to keep you connected with the heartbeat of the heartland. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, connecting rural Iowa with the news that matters to you.
It's time to run down those basis numbers for you here on Iowa Ag Matters on this Tuesday. I'm Dustin Huffman. Just about half of our elevators making changes here on their pricing. Let's run down where they're at. ADM Burlington, 28 cents under on corn, $3.87. Soybeans, 33 cents under at $10.76. Cargill and Eddyville, a dime under on corn. They're at $4.05 for the cash bid. New Co-op Algona, 30 cents under on corn, $3.85. Soybeans, 33 cents under, cash bid $10.76. Ag State Sheldon, 16 cents under on corn, $3.99. Soybeans, 40 cents under at $10.69. Ag State Delta, 31 cents under on corn, $3.84. Soybeans, 35 cents under at $10.74. At Cargill Cedar Rapids, they're 2 cents under on corn, $4.13. Soybeans, a dime under with a cash bid of $10.99. Five-Star Co-op Nashua, 26 cents under on corn, $3.89. Soybeans, 35 cents under at $10.74. Lincoln Way Energy Nevada, 15 cents under on corn, cash bid $4 even. ADM Des Moines, even on corn, the cash price there, $11.09. New Co-op in Red Oak, they're 18 cents under on corn, $3.97. Soybeans, 33 cents under at $10.76. Mid-Iowa Cooperative Green Mountain, 40 cents under on corn, $3.75. Soybeans, 60 cents under at $10.49 for the cash bid. New Co-op Sheraton, 22 cents under on corn, $3.93. Soybeans, 33 cents under, cash price $10.76. Walk-On Feed Ranch, 43 cents under on corn, $3.72. Soybeans, 57 cents under, $10.52. New Co-op Glidden, 26 cents under on corn, the cash bid $3.89. Soybeans, 33 cents under at $10.76. Innovative Ag Services Farley, 39 cents under on corn, $3.76. Soybeans, 55 cents under, cash bid $10.54. And at Cargill Muscatine, they're 15 cents under on corn, $4 even. Soybeans, 25 cents under at $10.84. Cash, corn, and soybean bids are subject to change without notice. Always check with your local elevator when making sales to obtain the most recent price. And that's been a check of your basis numbers here on Iowa Ag Matters. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this.
Rod Stewart.
When I see you tonight.
A special evening with the icon, night of hit after hit after hit with special guest Richard Marks. Friday, August 14th, Iowa State Fair Grandstand. Reserve tickets on sale now through iowastatefair.org. Don't miss an electrifying event. Friday, August 14th. Rod Stewart, live.
You're listening to Iowa Ag Matters, and here is Riley Smith's conversation with Pat Hord. He is the president-elect of the National Pork Producers Council, as Riley got the latest update on all things from the legislative side, including Prop 12.
And Pat, we're looking at a lot of very interesting things going on legislatively. That Farm Bill finally making it out of the House of Representatives, sitting within the Senate right now. Just kind of in general, how are you guys feeling about this version of the Farm Bill?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Riley. We actually were excited. We were able to get the language and the fix for the Prop 12 out of the House, and we certainly appreciate G.T. Thompson and his passion and being a champion for us on that. And so right now we're in that process. They're saying in the next couple of weeks they're going to put out the text for the Senate version of that bill, and so of the Farm Bill. And so we're definitely actively working on that right now, and doing everything we can to get the version of a version of the fix for Prop 12 into the Senate side. It's interesting to me. I'm learning. I'm having to go back to my government days, being in this role now. You know, it's like I don't even know. Maybe I didn't pay good enough attention. But so you have all this happening where you have this, like you get in the House, you get in the Senate, and then they go to a conference. And so then if you get it into so what we want to do is get it into the Senate version, and that way when we go to conference, it's going to stay in there. There's a risk that we, if it's only in one, then it could get stripped out. And so that's what we're working on right now, is to make sure we get it into the Senate version so that, we can get where we need to be.
So we had heard recently from Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley that, he was kind of listening around in the Senate chamber and was a little concerned about the support for Prop 12 to stay in that Senate version. I know it's kind of unfortunate because here we are so close to the finish line. We've been listening, and there was strong support in the House, and now it's not so much. What have you guys heard on that side, and what is the kind of sense of optimism moving forward with Prop 12?
Yeah, that's a big concern of ours. We are wanting to make sure that Senator Bozeman understands our priority and how important that is. I think he's concerned, obviously, but we think as the chairman of the Senate Ag and as well as his staff being focused on it, it should be a priority for them to get that into the bill, and that's really what we're doing right now, is trying to make sure that him and his staff and the committee understand how important that is. So yeah, so these things. I watched the House version, and it's really fascinating for me to watch how our grassroots organization, sometimes you don't see it in action every day, but when you watch how a grassroots organization that represents 60,000 pork producers, and you watch that happen in these different districts, and the House comes together, and you think, it's not going to make it, or yeah, it's going to make it, and it kind of goes back and forth. But then to watch those congressmen come around and say, no, we're going to make sure we get that in the bill, and so that's really just the work of our pork producers as well. It's not just one lobbyist or one thing. It takes a lot of effort in order to get those things done. And so that's what we're working on right now. We're going to have a mini fly-in here next week and make sure that we get certain people in front of their senators and make sure they understand the situation. And so, so that's kind of how it's going.
Right, of course, because, our senators, our representatives are there for the people. So get the people out there, get the voice heard.
Right.
That's the way to make change happen. And when we look at kind of how the Prop 12 situation has evolved, we saw those legal concerns get brought up in a court case.
Mhm.
And then Supreme Court said, actually, you have to do it this way.
Right.
So people look at the striking down, and it wasn't talking about necessarily the legality of Prop 12. It was, how are we going about getting that taken care of?
Exactly.
So now we're looking at, it's like, okay, we're going by the rule book. We're making sure that this is going through the way that it needs to go through.
Right.
And you would think that hopefully when you look at the interstate commerce side of things, that there's a little bit of reason there of like, okay, you can't have one state regulating how other states do their job.
Right. Yeah, I think the opposition a lot of times, they're saying, well, this is a states' rights issue. And we're like, yeah, we agree with you because you're forcing me as a producer to do things that that you passed in your state. It's like, if you want to pass a bill, we have the perfect example in Ohio. In 2010, there was an agreement that was made that we were, by 2025, we were going to essentially move to what people a lot of times call OPG. And so we were in the middle of transitioning to that. And we have all of our facilities transition to that. Well, we did that in 2021. Well, then we come back in 2024 and our customer says, hey, we're looking for this product. And so, okay, well, we should, we'll convert the facility again that I just did in 2021 for the Ohio standard. And so it just becomes, this patchwork becomes really untenable for us as producers to know what to build. And so I think that's where we have to really work on this patchwork of laws. And like you mentioned, it is a states' rights issue. And so we think that the Supreme Court was clear. They said, hey, you need to fix this through Congress, and that's what we're doing. So.
Exactly. And Pat, lots of great information today for anybody who wants to stay up to date with the Pork Producers Council. How can they do that?
Well, they can check us out on any of the social media. We have a website that's updated regularly, and so there's plenty of information going on there. And obviously, if they're an SIP member, so if they're part of NPPC, they can reach out to their SIP representative or any of us. We'd be happy to talk to them. So,
All right, Pat, thanks again for your time today, and enjoy the rest of the expo.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
Rod Stewart.
When I see you tonight,
A special evening with the icon.
on a downtown train,
A night of hit after hit after hit with special guest Richard Marks. Friday, August 14th, Iowa State Fair Grandstand. Reserve tickets on sale now through iowastatefair.org. Don't miss an electrifying event. Friday, August 14th. Rod Stewart, live.
This is the Midday Market Update on Iowa Ag Matters. I'm Mark Magnuson, joined at midday by Brandon Doherty of Total Farm Marketing for the Midday Market discussion. Brandon, what's happening with the trade in the grains?
We are higher this morning, though about a dime off the highs from earlier this morning in beans and maybe 5 cents off the highs from earlier this morning in corn. We saw an initial jump just after the open, especially on the beans. They were down about 10 before the market opened and ended up being about 20 higher at one point. That seems to be tied to rumors or talk that China was asking for prices for U.S. beans for export. Now, I haven't seen any concrete confirmation of that, which may be why we faded off of the highs, but we did get an initial jump, and it seems to be due to that.
And that would make sense, wouldn't it, Brandon? Because with the oil price coming down, we know that puts a little bit of pressure on the soy oil in the soybean complex. So it would make sense then that the soybeans would go down, but instead we saw that price movement to the upside today.
Right, exactly. So we're, and it's also despite the fact that we did see a increase 1% in the ratings of good to excellent for soybeans yesterday. We did also see winter wheat conditions improve 2%, though they're still at around 20-year lows overall. And then corn crop did also improve 1% to 68% good to excellent. So we're seeing relatively decent crops on the corn and beans. So I'm a little bit concerned yet that If these rumors kind of pass, the big picture trend for grain still seems to be downward, at least for the time being. And it may take some form of weather problems or something else on a global scale in terms of news to push the market back higher in any significant manner.
What's happening on the livestock side of the trade?
Higher today in both lives and feeders. I've got live cattle up over $4 in most contracts. Feeders up about $5 to $6. So quite a decent move higher here today. The live cattle contracts are breaking through resistance at the 40 and 50-day moving averages. So that is maybe triggering some technical buying interest. But in addition to that, I think that the news regarding the plant closings and the screwworm, that seems to have been kind of brushed off. I think maybe in part because crude oil prices have been falling.
ACM and CMA award winner, Hardy.
That's my favorite country song.
Live in concert.
I woke up on the wrong side of the truck bed this morning.
August 13th, 8 p.m., Iowa State Fair Grandstand.
You got it good, old boy.
With special guest McCoy Moore. Hardy Live. Reserve tickets on sale now through iowastatefair.org. Hardy 2026.
July corn unchanged at $4.15.5. July soybeans up 8 3/4 at $11.28. July soybean meal up $2.20 at $304.20. July soybean oil down $1.52 at $72.85. On the Merc, August live cattle up $4.43 at $247.68. August feeder cattle up $5.25 at $366.80. July lean hogs down 85 cents at $95.73. July pork cutout unchanged at $1.15. That was a check of the midday markets on Iowa Ag Matters. I'm Mark Magnuson.
Well, coming up now on Iowa Ag Matters, we're going to dive back into that livestock marketplace. Cattle picking up here today where they left off yesterday, triple-digit gains, and hogs looking at double-digit losses. Mark Magnuson again with Joe Camp of Comstock Investments.
What's happening on the livestock side of the trade?
Continued strength for cattle. This is now a stretch of several days. You have 3 out of 4 up where technically the move is strong. We just moved over last week's highs at the open here this morning for August. Live cattle, the most active live cattle futures contract back above 245, so catching back up towards a higher cash trade, and still viewing the potential for the cash market overall as being friendly for the time of the season that we're in, stretching further into summer and seeing that demand at the same time that supplies are still tight. And that should be the prevailing storyline for hogs as well, that we're into the summer months where consumer demand should be better and where we should also be seeing the tightening production, the constraints on having some of those holes in the supply that we could still expect coming into July. But only a small bounce for hogs after what has been a continued spiral over the past 4 months.
What's the best way for our listeners to get in touch for more marketing information?
Our website is at comstock.com. We've got all of our contact info and all of our market research up there at comstock.com.
Joe Camp of Comstock, my guest here today. Thanks so much for the time, Joe. Always appreciate it, and have a great day.
Thanks a lot, Mark. You too.
Hi, my name is Ethan Smith, and I've been a certified crop advisor in Iowa for about 6 years. The Iowa CCA program is valuable to me because it helps keep me informed on new topics and research around the industry, including soils, insects, diseases, and much more. It's also a great way to network with others around the state and beyond. Iowa is known for its crops, and that's why we're here. To learn more about becoming a certified crop advisor, visit iowacca.org.
Well, Mark, one of the things we've been watching is very closely is whether or not we're going to get this U.S.-Iran agreement. Sounds like we have kind of an agreement in place. We just got to put pen to paper here later on this week. And Senator Joni Ernst just came out this morning with a statement saying, while the full details of this agreement have yet to be released, a deal of this magnitude deserves thorough review, and it's critical the Senate has the opportunity to examine the details and ask tough questions and ensure America's interests and those of our allies are protected. So that came from Senator Ernst here earlier this morning.
Yeah, that is, what we've been leading up to is hopefully getting that signed on the 19th. It's good that we're getting more confirmation in terms of some of the details, but now we'll have to let it all work its way out and hopefully get that deal done on the 19th or near that date. We'll have more Iowa Ag Matters in a moment.
In rural Iowa, we know you're sold on your local radio station. The Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network partners with local Iowa stations to deliver the latest in agriculture news, including grain elevator prices, market reports, and ag policy news. Trusted local voices, trusted ag content. This message is brought to you by your friends at the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, where Iowa Ag matters.
Well, yesterday we had the conversation started that Mark had about swine herd health, and that was conversation, of course, during World Pork Expo. Mark's going to wrap up that conversation and talk about things that producers need to be thinking about here as we roll through 2026.
Mark Magnuson with the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, and I'm here today at World Pork Expo in Des Moines at the Iowa State Fairgrounds, and I'm talking with some of the members of the team of the National Pork Board, and I'm joined by Marisa Rotolo and Paul Ayers. And Marisa, could you tell me, please, your role at NPB?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a veterinary epidemiologist and director of swine health at National Pork Board.
And then Paul, same question for you.
Yeah, Mark, I work for the MASH Offs. We're an independent producer based in Southern Illinois. I'm also on the board of directors at National Pork Board.
When we're talking about the foreign animal diseases, of course, we always are thinking about African swine fever and building up those barriers. Are there other diseases that we need to have top of mind?
I would say from the perspective of foreign animal disease, we have the three. We've got classical swine fever, African swine fever, and foot and mouth disease virus. And so it's important to remember that while we make advances in that African swine fever space, all of those advances will apply to our classical swine fever, our foot and mouth. So while ASF tends to be front of mind, it's always good to remember that we also have things in place for classical swine fever and foot and mouth.
And with African swine fever, where are we at right now with the vaccine process?
In relation to the vaccine process, you have to think about African swine fever. It's a very complicated virus. And so it's hard to develop vaccines that will really have that immunity that would reduce shedding and cause, we call it sterilizing immunity in the sense that it would knock it out completely. And so we do have a lot of good products out there that are being tested on the global stage. But in terms of the USDA and American viewpoint, we don't have a candidate or a vaccine in place at this particular point in time.
Paul, when we think about foreign animal disease from the producer side, is that something that is more difficult to talk with producers about because it is something that is farther away and it doesn't touch them every single day?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges with foreign animal disease is keeping it front of mind, right? It's something that hopefully, knock on wood, we never have to experience in the U.S., but we always need to be preparing in case we ever are faced with a foreign animal disease. I view it very similar to kind of like having an insurance policy. By preparing for a foreign animal disease, by participating in industry programs, whether it's the U.S. SHIP program, the Secure Pork Supply program, those are all steps producers can take to make sure they're prepared if we ever are faced with a foreign animal disease. So it's just important to keep those front in mind so we don't forget about it and so we're prepared.
Yeah, and if I can add on to that, while we may not have a vaccine today, we do have very good programs like our Secure Pork Supply, like AgView, like Certified Swine Sampler Collector Program, which put us in a really good place from a preparedness and prevention part.
So, Marisa, is there anything else you'd like to let our Iowa viewers, our Iowa listeners know about when it comes to the work that you're doing with National Pork Board and just what you're thinking about right now?
Yeah, I would love for producers to know that as we, bring out this national swine health strategy, really think about it from the approach of two prongs. So we've got research to advance our knowledge base in each of these pathogen spaces, and then we've got education. So taking that research and translating it to the SLAT level into applicable SLAT level solutions for producers.
And then Paul, same question for you. Is there anything else you'd like to pass on to our Iowa listeners?
Yeah, I would just really ask Iowa producers and producers across the country to get engaged in the process. Ask questions about the National Swine Health Strategy. If you have concerns or reservations, reach out to your producer groups, your state association. I think it's real important that we continue to get feedback from producers to lead this initiative and make sure we're providing resources in the right area.
And we hear that all the time, and it is so true that producer voices carry a lot of weight. What they say, can be very influential with a lot of groups and just the direction of the industry as a whole. So that is very important. Marisa Rotolo and Paul Ayers, my guests here today on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Mark Magnuson.
Hi, my name is Ethan Smith, and I've been a certified crop advisor in Iowa for about 6 years. The Iowa CCA program is valuable to me because it helps keep me informed on new topics and research around the industry, including soils, insects, diseases, and much more. It's also a great way to network with others around the state and beyond. Iowa is known for its crops, and that's why we're here. To learn more about becoming a certified crop advisor, visit iowacca.org.
ACM and CMA award winner, Hardy.
That's my favorite country song.
Live in concert.
I woke up on the wrong side of the truck bed this morning.
August 13th, 8 p.m., Iowa State Fair Grandstand.
You got it good, old boy.
With special guest McCoy Moore. Hardy Live. Reserve tickets on sale now through iowastatefair.org. Hardy 2026.
Well, that's going to put the wraps on today's episode of Iowa Ag Matters. Thanks to Riley, thanks to Mark, and of course, thanks to you for listening. We'll see you back here again tomorrow on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.